Well, hello world. Blimey, I've probably spent more time doing YouTube videos than I have actually listening to vinyl this week. But yeah, it's the end of my half-term holiday, and so I thought I would just quickly do a video about my hi-fi system challenge. Okay, my own response to it. It doesn't mean that people can't carry on posting what they would put there, but this is essentially what I would choose, and I'll sort of go quite deeply really into the reasons why I've chosen these things. Okay, part of it's going to be watching me chatting here, and then I'll go onto the internet and show you the products. Okay, so to start with, I think the big issue about choosing a system that would have 60s pop music fans absolutely raving, which was really my challenge, is not so much really the equipment itself. There are plenty of manufacturers that have got pedigrees going way back to not just the 60s, but right back to the 1920s, that are still sort of selling products on the market now. I have to say thank you to Sam66 Hamzal, I think it is, or Sam who posted a video reply and put the link on my original video, because he sort of reminded me of manufacturers such as Sugden and Wharfdale that yes, of course I knew about these people, but they hadn't necessarily occurred to me in terms of putting together my system for this challenge. Okay, Sam's system is a very well thought out one, and it would be great to actually hear it one day. Okay, and just because I'm touting these next products, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna magically go bibbidi bobbidi boo and conjure up that system, because it ain't gonna happen. Okay, here I'm spending more money theoretically than I've spent on my entire system and record cleaning and probably vinyl as well. Okay, remember that I am sort of targeting this at someone that probably worked as a very successful financial dealer in the city, and a bit sort of Jerry Ledbettery, who came home to a polite sherry and hi-fi, while the wife was out doing her choir and sewing classes. So it's really not me at all. But this has got to sound, it's got to sound fantastic. It's got to get your average pop fan as well of the 60s really excited about hearing their music, and make bands like the Beatles and stuff like that really show them off at their best. Okay, it has to use components that are new nowadays, i.e. that you can go to a website or to a shop and buy them brand new, and no component can cost more than a posh professional's monthly salary, i.e. I'm stating a ballpark of roughly maybe £1,500 to £3,000. Okay, which means your entire system must sort of clock in at under 9,000, or about £9,000. That is minus cables. If you take what Hi-Fi's advice, then stands and cables should sort of cost 10% of your system. So we're saying £900 worth of cables as well. I haven't really given them very much thought, but I haven't given them any thought. Okay, but there you go. I'm assuming that a hi-fi enthusiast of that level has probably got cables and stuff that they can use to link it together, at least to start with. Okay, so starting out then, the difficulty is not really, as I say, finding the products. It's actually trying to sort of apply today's hi-fi philosophies to yesterday's market. Okay, because if you read Audio T's very first brochure on how to put together a hi-fi, published in 1969. It makes very dangerous reading because this bloke was an obvious misogynist, who really, the wife got no say at all in this. It was a very male-dominated hobby, and the wife was quite often referred to as the dear lady or the good woman or something like that. Send her out with her mother while you're out doing the serious hi-fi listening and everything. It's just horrid, really. But nowadays, hopefully, Audio T, they've made a joke of it on their website. You can download it. You can go there and you can find it and download it. It's a little PDF booklet that they sort of scanned in and onto their website, and but the philosophy was just totally different. Okay, and looking at that, it's quite obvious. And also reading around other books and things from the time, it's quite obvious that the turntable itself had very little impact as far as received hi-fi wisdom. Received hi-fi wisdom changes depending on what they want to sell you. Okay, and in those days, the sort of hi-fi claptrap that they were putting out was that the turntable itself, provided that it fulfilled a basic minimum specification of so many % wow and flutter, and so many % distortion, and the turntables span round plus or minus whatever, then it wouldn't have any impact at all on the sound quality. Okay, the cartridge might. Okay, but similarly with amps, provided that the distortion figures were within a certain limit, and the damping factor was within a certain limit, and everything else, then it was actually fine. Okay, and again had no discernible effect on the sound quality. The big things that had effect on the sound quality are speakers. Okay, now I'm not going to mention Riga too much here, because Riga themselves were not a company until the early 1970s. Okay, but it did take companies like Riga, who were big champions of the fact that really everything starts with your source. Okay, record players had different sound qualities. If you took a poor sounding record player and played it through expensive speakers, it would sound like a poor sounding record player played through expensive speakers. Okay, and they kind of turned the whole thing upside down, and then went ahead producing really sort of for its time and within the context of hi-fi, good value, bargain priced products aimed at realistic, i.e. not Jerry Ledbetter style sort of punters that could afford to pay realistic prices, and it still sound absolutely fantastic. Okay, and they have gone on to prove time and time again that every time you move up that chain and upgrade your components, you are getting an upgrade in sound quality. Okay, but I can't choose a Riga turntable. Okay, back in the 60s, the big sort of champions of that every turntable sort of tried to follow, or every turntable manufacturer tried to follow, were a company called Garrard. Now, unfortunately, Garrard don't make turntables anymore. Okay, or at least I don't know that they do. And there's certainly the Garrard 301s and the Garrard 401s. If you can get them, they sound absolutely amazing, even by today's standards, and they have a very big sort of following. Okay, I should say here again, it's a slight digression again, but back in those days, you're buying a turntable, you're almost expected to make it yourself. Quickly get your hands dirty and do it yourself. You bought basically a sort of plinth okay, you might have to buy a separate arm board. You might have to buy a separate tone arm. You definitely have to buy a separate cartridge, okay? It all depends on the grade of the deck. The higher up you go, the less it seems that they want to sell you. But there seem to be, I mean, even with my Goldring Lenko from the late 60s, early 70s that I had, you had to sort of buy the plinth and then make the box yourself. I think the one I had was certainly sort of a handmade thing, and they gave you the sort of specifications and all the measurements, and basically told you how to make it, and you made that bit, and then you mounted their turntable into your box. So this is it's a minefield if you were to go back and ever buy that vintage gear. Okay, all right. So the Garrards, then, they have a huge following even now. Okay, their prices on eBay for used vintage turntables that are in good condition, go through the roof again compared to what you would expect to pay for what is basically a domestic appliance from the 60s. Okay, but they were wonderful things. Now, hot on the heels of them are companies such as a Swiss company, I think they're Swiss, called Torrens. Torrens, or Torrens, okay, and they are still a going concern today. In those days, their TD124, I think it was, and the TD124 Mark II were, again, a hard act to follow, okay, and they are still a going concern. They still make high-end turntables, okay. So the turntable that I have chosen to go at the head of my system then is the Torrens TD350, okay, with the TP92 tone arm, okay, and it looks the part. I'll show you on the website very, very quickly at the end of this video, but it really looks the part, as well as I would imagine, because I daren't try and find these things out and make out that I'm interested in buying them, just in case I end up out on the street because I've pawned my elbows or something to to buy the thing. But yeah, it certainly looks the part of a vintage turntable, and because Torrens also makes some sort of wiggy colours and wiggy modern shapes that of platter a bit, similarly to like the RP8, where you've got this sort of wiggly design that you can have, and I really think that for a vintage for a 60s-esque system, it should look the part as much as possible. So there you go, that is £2,900, give or take a few quid, okay, on Audio Affair, which is quite a good hi-fi website, and to go with that, the cartridge I would choose is now Ashley, bless Ashley, love Ashley to pieces and all, but he did throw a spanner in the ointment by reminding us that elliptical styli did not exist in those days. Now, in my sort of record care video that I put up yesterday, I talked about this skiing analogy, okay, and basically, even the shape of a skier's skis is designed to help them cut through snow as sort of as smoothly and as quickly and efficiently as possible. An elliptical stylus is kind of shaped like a ski, but in absolute miniature, sort of less than the width of a human hair levels, okay. They didn't do that in those days. They had conical styli. Now, I think that probably, to get a conical styli and put it on something like a Torrens is too draconian. you know, you're talking about a conical styli, you're really looking at something like a Riga Carbon or something like that, which is, you know, a cheap 20 quid throwaway cartridge, and to chuck that onto a sort of £2,900 turntable is probably not good hi-fi advice anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to be a little less draconian than that. I did say that a cartridge had to be a moving magnet cartridge, and I will stick by that. I will go for an Autophon 2M Black, which is a sort of £500-ish. So in other words, an absolutely top of the range moving magnet cartridge. Costs more than my Riga Exact, and you know, its sound quality is very neutral all the way throughout the frequency spectrum. It's incredibly detailed, and when you sort of see the rest of the system, you'll see the benefits of having a smooth, detailed cartridge, because it will balance out with the rest of the system. Okay, so that's my turntable front end. Now, similarly with amplifiers, the 60s received wisdom was that provided that the amplifier fulfilled certain specifications, it was okay, it was fine. You didn't even need to worry about listening to it. Okay, and you know, before you even bought it. Okay, you know, again, that has been proven time and time again. You know, even in my own, you know, very admittedly narrow listening field, because I tend, you know, although I've listened and demoed other products in the past, you know, I'm very happy with my Riga stuff, and but I do know that amplifiers sound different. Okay, the difference between the Mira 3 and the LXR, for example, is just, you know, beyond. Okay, the LXR is a nice get up and go amplifier, very civilized, but still a very lively, fun sounding amplifier, whereas the Mira 3 was far more chilled out, and so, you know, the difference is night and day really between the two products. However, having said that, in the 60s, transistor amplifiers were in their infancy. There were proponents of transistor amplifiers, usually those people who wanted to sell them, but really the hi-fi enthusiasts in those days would be buying valves. Okay, nowadays valve amplifiers are rather expensive, and really the province of a very few. Okay, and again, you know, the big sort of, I suppose, sort of, I'm trying to think of the word here, but the big change in thinking, as it were, is the amount of power. You know, yes, obviously, the more power you have, you know, the louder it'll go, kind of thing. But you know, in the real world, if anybody were to hear 1 watt of pure sound, they would be pinned to the wall. Okay, it is jolly loud. Transistor amplifiers go far louder than that. My LXR is by no means considered a powerhouse, yet it can deliver sort of over 80 watts per channel into 6 ohms. And, you know, that is jolly loud, okay? But a lot of that is dissipated in heat, okay? Whereas valve amplifiers are much more efficient at using the power that they have. So if they have lower power figures, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be any quieter or any less suited for a modern lounge or a normal size lounge than a transistor amp. Okay, so I'm going for valves simply because, you know, again, it was, you know, it was the commonplace thing in those days, and it has to be said that all of those early Beatles albums and you know 60s records and stuff, all of their equipment would be valve equipment, okay, including the stuff to master it on, okay. You know, transistors didn't come in a big way until the early 70s, and once again I have gone into screensaver mode, and I've presented with a blank screen for a second or two. Voila, the password, and I'm back again. It's me again. Okay, so yeah, valve amplifiers, you know, were you know the commonplace norm in the 60s, and the big manufacturer of valve amplifiers that were big in the 60s and are still big now and still extremely well respected and produce some absolutely stonkingly high-end stuff, are a company called Quad, Q-U-A-D, okay. And I've chosen, can I remember the model number of what I've chosen? Probably not, but I will show you. It's basically an integrated amplifier. Now, even What Hi-Fi, who, you know, again, you know, take them with a very, very, very large pinch of salt, but even What Hi-Fi have reviewed this amplifier. They gave it 4 stars simply because it's rather expensive. It's £4,500, so it's over my theoretical hypothetical budget here, and you know, so I'm going to have to scrimp in other places, and we'll see in a minute. But it's £4,500, and it was described by them because valve amps are well known for sort of, you know, a lovely warm blankety sound, very, very smooth, very sort of charming, and you know, textured and thick, okay. Their drawbacks are that bass is quite often described, you know, by transistor standards at any rate, bass is quite often described as woolly, and the top end is also sometimes, you know, just lacking that extra bit of sparkle. But having said that, you know, going the other way, a cheap transistor amplifier will just boom and tiz, okay. And so, you know, it is possible, and I know because I have them in my possession right now and I'm looking at it as I speak, but you know, it is possible to make transistor amplifiers that are just as civilized and warm and you know, still have energy about them. The same, it's possible to do valve amplifiers that are civilized and have, you know, a nice incisive powerful bass, and, you know, a sort of, you know, a sparkly but not over exaggerated treble, okay. And, you know, with valve amps, it is the mid-range that that is just absolutely beautiful, okay. Yeah, and I know that even from comparing valve and transistor masters of certain albums that I've got in my collection, okay. So I've gone for this Quad amplifier, £4,500, okay, that is in this kind of you know, very powerful and incisive for a valve amp, okay. It loses marks according to What Hi-Fi because, you know, it's not as punchy and powerful as a £4,500 transistor amplifier, but you know, it's still punchy and powerful, you know, compared to, you know, valve amplifiers. So there you go, big deal, okay. Sorry and all, okay. So there's my turntable sorted, the Torrens, the Quad amplifier. Now, speakers, I'm in 2 minds about, and it's always good to be in 2 minds about speakers, because even though the other components, it has been proven, do have an effect on the sound quality, it will never be as much as the speakers, you know. And again, you see the old 60s sort of hi-fi wisdom is probably still as true today, really. You know, you've got to choose your speakers with care. I've come up with 2, therefore, and I'm in 2 minds about whichever one I would choose, okay. Now, not far away from where I live, in a sleepy town called Hailsham in East Sussex. There a company started called Spendor. Okay, it was a husband and wife couple. How charmingly 1960s is this? It was a husband and wife couple called Dorothy and Spencer, hence Spendor. Okay, Spencer Dorothy, and they have produced, again, some of the most well-respected and well-loved speakers in history, and their Spendor A3 is the one that I would consider buying in this system. It's £1,250. Okay, now again, because it's a current speaker, you can read reviews about it. You can go out and buy it. Okay, again, the reviews I've read about it are from Hi-Fi Choice. You can read them on the just go on their websites and you'll find them. But Hi-Fi Choice and What Hi-Fi have both reviewed this thing. Both of them seem to agree that this is a very polite sounding speaker. Okay, its bass is not the thumpiest in the entire world, but then again, I think I would possibly welcome that, provided that it was fast and rhythmic. Okay, and I don't believe that the Spender lacks on the fast and rhythmic side. Okay, but it just doesn't go down as deep as other speakers of that price and that ilk. Okay, but it's a very civilized speaker. Okay, now given that our cartridge that we've chosen is a very civilized cartridge, a very detailed and civilized cartridge, our amplifier is a valve powerhouse with a fast and rhythmic sound that even manages to sound quite modern and transistor-esque, but just not as transistor-esque as a transistor. Given that, okay, so we're balancing out then civilized cartridge, punchy amplifier, civilized speakers. Okay, the other speakers that I have chosen, I've only unfortunately read the What Hi-Fi review of this one. Okay, these are the Tannoy Revolution XT6F speakers. Okay, they're a little bit cheaper than the Spendors at $999. Okay, the Spendors are $12.50 in case I didn't say that, but the Tannoys are $999. Okay, have a reputation. Again, Tannoy are a brand that sort of stretch back to the 60s. Okay, they are extremely famous for producing speakers that are that go into the tens of thousands of pounds. There are Tannoy Westminster speakers that you can buy now that weigh probably as much as a sofa or a settee or something like that, and that are like little sideboards that are designed to fit into the corners of your room, and are 28 grand. Okay, and they're famous for those speakers. They stretch back and back and back and back. But Tannoy, it's even become a word like Hoover. You talk about a Hoover, it can be anyone's, anything that cleans the carpet. But a Hoover is essentially a brand name, and nowadays you go out and go to a fete or something like that, and you talk about things being announced over the Tannoy. Okay, and it's essentially because of the reputation of Tannoy themselves. It's second to none really in audio manufacturing. Okay, and so these Tannoy Revolutions then have a very high reputation, and their character is livelier than the Spendors. Okay, very foot tapping, very toe tapping. Now you see, I think I might enjoy that. I think I might, in the context of a system that has already a very smooth sounding cartridge. I'm not sure about the character of the record deck itself, but certainly the very smooth sounding Autophon cartridge with a valve amplifier that is quite punchy, the tannoys might just set it off really, really nicely. Okay, and I think that would be my inclination to go for these tannoys. Now, what have I spent there then, people? I've spent maybe a little over £3,000. Let's call it 3,500. Okay, on record player and cartridge. I've spent 4,500 on amp, so that's taking me to 8,000. I've spent £1,000 on a pair of speakers should I go for the tannoys, and that would be £9,000. Okay, and here endeth the lesson, really. Okay, it's just been a bit of fun. It's just been something to, you know, stop me sort of going into the levels of senile dementia totally. And there we go. Hopefully you'll enjoy putting together what you would think would be your ideal modern but 60s-esque sounding system. Okay, and I will leave you there, but I will just quickly sort of run through these products on the website. Okay, all right.